Today, the 14th of December, marks 60 years since the first ever tie test in cricket history. That match, played at the Gabba in Brisbane, was between Sir Frank Worrell's West Indies and Richie Benaud's Australia. Now, chasing 233 for a victory on day 5, the Aussies slumped to 92 for 6 and seemed headed for certain defeat. But Alan Davidson, who also took 11 wickets in the match, and Captain Benaud put on 134 for the 7th wicket to almost miraculously put the Aussies on the brink of victory. Davidson made 80 and Benaud 52, but both fell within a few runs of each other to leave Australia needing 5 runs with 2 wickets in hand. That dramatic final over bowled by Sir Wes Hall had almost everything. There was a catch put down, followed by 2 run-outs as the gripping contest ended in the first ever tie in Test history. To this day, the match is regarded as one of the greatest Test matches of all time. And there has been only one other tied Test match that happened between Australia and India in Madras back in 1986. So George and Wayne, none of us would have been alive when that match was played, but we've seen the video. And we've heard, and
George.
We've heard people like Wes Hall talking about what was going through his mind while he was bowling that last over. But a tied Test match against a strong Australia team in 1960, when the West Indies were beginning to show itself as a force in international cricket, is certainly a great memory for us now.
Certainly is. I mean, I've had discussions with the great Sir Wes Hall about it. I've had, the opportunity to be in his company, and I asked him about it. And one of the things I asked him about, other than that catch that he ran under, or he dropped, was also the run out. Yeah. Because, those days we had no third umpire to check, and it was a close call. I mean, it was a direct hit, and the umpire gave out the batsman, and West Indies tied the game. That umpire could have easily said that out, and there wouldn't be a time. That was the question I asked him, and of course he's so candid about it, he's so animated when he talks about it, because it's almost like he's reliving the moment, because it meant so much. It was the first tie test in history, and of course they were on the road, they were in Australia. Mm-hmm. So that was my, talking to him and picking his brain about it, and he was so proud in discussing it and talking about it. Yeah. It made me feel as if I was actually there. Yeah. So, I appreciated that moment.
Yeah. A big 100, George, in that match for Sir Garfield Sobers, who was just 24 years old at the time. Sir Wes Hall had a 10 for in the game, or at least 9, I think.
9 wickets.
He was 23 years old at the time, and certainly a huge moment, not only for West Indies cricket, but in the annals of Test cricket history. That one has gone down in a big way.
Yeah, the only thing that match didn't have, Lance, Wayne, was television, because this would have been something, meaning live television and live pictures rather than the black and white images we are seeing now. Sir Wes Hall was a Trojan in that game, in the original, well, not in the original, in the size estimate, in the size perspective of the word, because you spoke about his 9 wickets. Don't forget his half century in the first innings, and even 50, and then a valuable 18 runs when the Windies struggled for runs in that second innings. You spoke about Sir Gary's century in the first innings off not many balls. You would have wanted to mention, Lance, that he came in to rescue us. I think we were 60 odd for 3 when Sir Gary came in that first innings and really lifted the Windies up. Look, gentlemen, if you make 700 runs in a cricket match, as the West Indies did, they batted first, so you would say, all right, they made 700 and odd cumulatively across both innings. You don't expect to be tying any game that goes to the end, and the game went to the end. There was a rest day, making it 6 days 6 days, the whole thing spread over, of course, 5 days playing, 1 rest day. It was tremendous, and look, there are things in history that have been diminished by time. For instance, when I say for instance, there have been things in history that when you re-examine, you look at it, you say, well, I can't quite see what the drama was about all this. I can't see what the excitement was. I can't really see why history would accord it a special place even to this day. This tied test does not fit that category because it was tremendous in every sense of the word. And the fact that history of Test cricket, almost 2,000 Test matches, this is one of only 2 tied tests, tells you what happened there. And Wayne mentioned something about the umpires quickly, Lance, and I want to tell you that this is what I believe. Umpires are professionals first. Wayne spoke about so many instances where the local umpires could have affected the result of the game in that Aussie run chase on the last day, where the instinct was to call what they saw, and what they saw were the correct calls: a run out, a throw, or something going to the boundary that was disputed, or anything, an extra anything. Those weren't disputed, and I'm telling you, I hesitate when people are talking about home umpires being biased towards the home team, because I think that cricket men and women nowadays, through and through, are honest first and partisan considerations come next. And when you're in the heat of the battle, the instinct is to call what you see, call it right.
Don't get too carried away there, George. That's the reason why they have, what do you call it now? The
neutral umpires.
Neutral umpires. Listen, I spoke to Rowan Kanai when he was coaching the national team and I was playing for Jamaica at the time. And I asked him about that innings by Sir Garfield Sobers, and he said that was his greatest innings. That 100 that he made in that tie test. He rated that over his 365 at Sabina Park. He thought that he batted so well. It was such a fun time for cricket West Indies, and there was nothing to argue about. West Indies actually came back and drew that game. Well, fantastic stuff.
Well, you say the argument about for neutral umpires was made by the fact that there were lopsided decisions given by.
That's how Cleveland lost in New Zealand when Michael Waller kicked over the stump.
You can attest to domestic cricket being riven by that problem as well when you play. But I'm saying, how many times have we seen umpires not call what they see, and they are neutral umpires? So I'm just saying that, you know,
yeah,
there's no
when
perfection.
It's a neutral, yeah, but Job, when it's
there's no perfection in
when it's a neutral umpire, we just see it as an error.
We're not criticizing the quality of the umpire. We're crediting, as you did, we're crediting the men who worked on that day, calling what they saw, and not even considering, I don't think, the possibility of calling making a partisan decision.
Yeah, George, I had established earlier on that none of the three of us would have been alive when that test match was being played. We have a man who was alive at the time, and his name is Joseph Reds Pereira, international cricket commentator, now 81 years old, I think. Reds, you were just about 20 years old when that match was being played. Where were you, and what are your best memories of that match?
Lance, I was 22 years of age. I was in Georgetown, Guyana, and I will plan to watch the test, or hear the test match at the home of Cecil Kippins, the international test umpire from Guyana. I had done the 1951 series listening on the back of a chair to Radio Australia, so I'd been through the whole thing. But this was Test Match 502 that we were living our memories, and it was like a tale of two cities. If you looked at the first innings, West Indies got 453 after being 65 for 3. And I'm sure you all have mentioned already the Sobers 132. Well,
yes.
Listening to that, I mean, I was almost seeing it here. Moyes and McGillivray and Charlton describing Benno coming in to bowl to Sobers, and he was straight driving, using his feet. It was a magnificent performance. And then the West Indies, when Sobers eventually went after getting, I think, 50 in about 50 minutes, Worrell came in and Solomon got together, and they played in a different manner. They were then further supported by Alexander and Hall, and the West Indies got that 453. But then Norman O'Neill played brilliantly, 181. He was well supported by Simpson, 92 out of 505. And Lance and your panel, this looked then, as we were listening, entering like the third day, like this would have been a draw, gentlemen.
Yeah. Reds, I've heard Wes Hall speak on many occasions about what happened in that test match, and he tells us of a story of some words that the captain, Sir Frank Worrell, had with him when he was about to bowl that last over. Something to the effect of, if he bowls a no ball, he'd have to find his way back home to the Caribbean.
Well, that conversation did in fact take place. I mean, there are pictures. And from what Wes told me, he said, Wes, they do not know what I'm saying to you. They think that we are discussing some kind of delivery. You must bowl line length. All I'm saying to you, Wes, do not bowl a no ball. That's all I'm saying to you. And it was a beautiful piece of thinking by Worrell, because he obviously had the batsmen after a slide initially, and then Davison and his partner Davison and Benno added 134, and it looked then like it, game on for Australia, and then came the brilliant run out first by Conrad Hunt, and then the one which, of course, is world famous is a Joe Solomon hitting the wicket down from square on. He was seeing only one stump. But I mean, Davison, brilliant game. I mean, Davison 5 for 135, and then came back to pick up 6 for 87. We must give credit to Wesley Hall in another area, gentlemen. He made 50 in that first innings that helped the West Indies to get to 453. You take away that 50, you could see what the Australian lead would have been. And then in the second innings, he played an important hand of 18, very important 18, which helped the West Indies to then offer them 233. And then, of course, you already mentioned that he picked up 5 in the first innings, and then 6 for 87. 6 for 87. But, it was all over virtually when, in fact, the West Indies had McDonald for 16, Simpson without scoring, Harvey for 5, O'Neill for 26, Flavel for 7, and then came the drama,
yes.
High drama at the end. And I must tell you, myself and Cecil Kippins at the end just didn't know whether we had won, whether we had drawn, whether it was tie. It was pandemonium on the ridge. I mean, the experienced commentators, McGilvery, Michael Charlton, Johnny Moyes, they didn't quite work out what is happening. It was pandemonium at Brisbane.
Yeah.
And it was, in fact, 1877, it took something like 87 years for such a match to take place, which virtually saved the Test game in Australia. The crowds were marvelous, and 100,000 people gathered down the Melbourne street to say goodbye to the West Indies team. And Frank Worrell, really led the West Indies off and on the field in a most exemplary way, gentlemen.
Yeah, Rez, as usual, always a pleasure talking to us. I can hear the excitement in your voice, even though it's so many decades in history. But really great to have your perspective on what happened in that Test match 60 years ago. Thanks, Rez.
Pleasure. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, we go to break. Back with more on The Zone after this.